Hijuelos, in case you didn't get my name during my two-sentence introduction. But first, I'm here to introduce John Corey Whaley. In doing so, I have to confess that while reading his young adult novel, I often found myself wondering as to what distinguishes this work, where things come back from most adult fiction. And for the life of me, I could not pin anything down, other than the fact that, aside from an occasional preoccupation with zombies, its protagonist, Cullen Winter, happens to be a 17-year-old telling his story. The book's setting, the small tree-laden town of Lilly, Arkansas, population 3,947, is depicted in wonderful and rich detail, as are its various characters, which for the record include a famous ornithologist and a young man who leaves Lilly to become a missionary in Ethiopia. Now, having written a YA novel myself, I know that the #1 rule of such books is to keep things simple and more on the surface than not, which is not as easy as it may sound. But this young author manages to introduce more than a few interesting themes in his well-thought-out story. From musings about God, death, nature, family, life, grief, and the travails of growing up, all with imagination and verve. For my part, while absorbing a framework built around the sudden reappearance in that town of a thought-to-be-extinct woodpecker and the mysterious disappearance of a beloved sibling, among other doings, I found myself feeling continuously charmed by the can-do-ness of the narrative. Call me nostalgic, but reading this young author's work, I was reminded of just how guileless and unself-conscious writing can be when one starts out, with prose that just flow in a rather matter-of-fact fashion. From an early section of this book, when I was 11 years old, my dad took Gabriel and me to this museum about 3 hours from Lilly. It had big life-size dinosaur skeletons in an aquarium with Arkansas's fish and alligators in it. It had a mammoth's fossilized footprint and rock candy in the gift shop. It had a room you could go into that would capture your shadow in a mirror that made you look upside down. And on the way home, as my brother slept in the middle seat between us, my dad told me in a slightly drunken slur that he would, without any hesitation, take me with him to the end of the world. It's beautiful. It's that kind of sloughed-off reference to the father of a hidden texture peeking out from under the surface narrative that often occurs in the book to subtle effect. Just what good fiction, adult or not, should always aspire to. About the author himself, I really don't know anything, other than what the jacket copy says, that he is a school teacher from Louisiana, and that Where Things Come Back is his debut novel. But to that I would add that he has written a book that shows the kind of promise that all of us can look forward to blossoming in the future. In that, I can only wish him well. In any event, ladies and gents, here's the author himself, John Corey Whaley.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you to the National Book Foundation. This is such an honor and it's so very humbling. Thank you all for being here. This is great. I'm actually going to read a brief section from chapter 13. And Oscar set it up a little bit. The story concerns a young man in a small Arkansas town whose younger brother has gone missing. And the section I'm going to read deals with his father, who is basically trying whatever he can think of to find his missing child, his 15-year-old son. And in a last-ditch effort, he has hired a psychic to guide him in some direction. And this is chapter 13, The Simplest Thing in the World. We stood in a field, one where trees had been clear-cut and what remained was nothing more than what looked like some sad ancient war zone. The grass was mostly dead, the dirt had gone from brown to gray, and the one tree that did still stand was bare and leaning like a creature over a small child's nightmare bed. Valonia Klein stood before us, her hands outstretched, her eyes closed again, her lips quivering, mumbling something either very important or completely full of shit. Lucas was looking at me the way someone does when a psychic is standing in a field in front of him and talking to the earth. Mina Prescott was now holding my mother's hand, and my father was leaning against the truck, his eyes fixed on the mumbling woman. She walked out about 100 yards, stopped, and then turned around. Her eyes flew open. Her shoulders jolted back. She put her hands to her sides. "He is here," she said quietly, but loud enough to be heard, pointing to the ground below her. "Here?" My mother waved her arms around to encompass the entire field. "Or there?" she asked, pointing to the ground beneath Valonia Klein. "Here," Valonia said again, pointing beneath her. No one, to my surprise, was crying yet. No one was talking either. Lucas looked over at my father, who looked at me quickly before reaching into the back of his truck and bringing out a shovel. He tossed it onto the ground in front of me. He then brought out another one and propped it against his right shoulder, walking toward the woman. Lucas Cater walked over and grabbed the shovel, looked up at me and said, "Go sit in the truck." I did, and Mina Prescott went with me. My mother sat on the hood of the truck, watching as they began to dig into the dead earth. Valonia Klein sat down on the dirt beside them, watching the hole get wider and deeper with each jab and throw. When one is sitting in the back seat of his father's truck beside his best friend's girlfriend, who has her head resting on his shoulder, and watching as his father and best friend slowly puncture the world to find his little brother, he imagined Valonia Klein standing up, dusting off her long skirt and walking down into the hole. He sees her come back out, a dirty, blood-stained t-shirt in her hands. She unwads the shirt, holding it up to her chest the way a mother would hold it up to her child in a clothing store, and it is black, with a big white angel in the center. It is the last shirt that Gabriel Witter was seen wearing. He sees Valonia Klein gently lay the shirt down on the ground and then walk back down into the hole as they continue to dig around her. She walks back out, now holding a pair of blue jeans, knees stained with grass and dirt, blood caked around the ankles, pockets torn with holes and unraveling. These were the last pants that Gabriel Witter was seen wearing. She sets the jeans gently down under the shirt and begins to walk in a slow circle around the outfit, chanting and holding her hands up in the air. Behind her, from out of the earth, emerges a naked and dirty Gabriel Witter, his hair matted with blood and grime. His skin is clean white in some places, but nearly black in others. He turns toward the truck, looks straight at his older brother, and smiles the slightest of smiles. Thank you.